The rain hammered against the glass roof of the Imperial War Museum in London. I watched an old man shuffle past the Spitfire display, his weathered hands gripping a walking stick, his cheap windbreaker soaked through. A school group pushed past him without looking, their teacher's voice echoing through the atrium about sacrifice and heroism. The old man didn't seem to notice. He moved slowly toward the Normandy exhibit, stopping in front of a tactical map showing Operation Epsom, Montgomery's massive push toward Caen in June 1944. A teenager in designer trainers laughed, pointing at the old man's wet jacket. "Mate, there's a cafe upstairs if you need to dry off," he said, not unkindly, but with that casual dismissal the young reserve for the invisible elderly. The old man didn't respond. He just stared at the map, his finger trembling as it traced a line south of Caen. Then he spoke, so quietly I almost missed it. "The dates are wrong. We crossed the Odon on the 27th, not the 28th. The teenager rolled his eyes. "Yeah, all right, Grandad. Wikipedia says the 28th. Wikipedia wasn't there." Something in his voice made me look closer. "I'm a serving officer, Royal Marines, 2 tour in Afghanistan, and I know that tone. It's the voice of a man who's seen things he can't unsee." I stepped closer. That's when I saw his hand. As he reached toward the display, his sleeve rode up, revealing a faded tattoo on his forearm. Not elaborate, not modern, just a simple regimental number and the letters A and SH, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. Below it, a scar ran from wrist to elbow, white and thick, the kind that only comes from shrapnel or blade. "Sir," I said, straightening unconsciously, "Argyll and Sutherland." He turned and his eyes, pale blue, watery with age, fixed on me with sudden focus. He saw my posture, read my bearing, and something shifted in his face. "2nd Battalion," he said, "attached to 15th Scottish Division, Operation Epsom." The teenager had gone quiet. The teacher had stopped mid-sentence. Everyone within earshot was listening now. "What's your name, sir?" I asked. He hesitated, then straightened slightly, as if remembering who he used to be. "James Colquhoun, Lance Corporal, though that was a very long time ago." I extended my hand. He shook it, his grip surprisingly firm. "Would you tell me about the Odon?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, then at the map, then back at me. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, steadier, younger somehow. "You want to know why the dates are wrong? Because some things don't make it into the history books, some things we were told to forget." He moved to a bench, lowered himself carefully, and began to speak. "I was 19 years old when we rolled into Normandy. 19, and I thought I understood war because I'd read about Ypres, about the Somme, about all the mistakes the last generation made. I was a fool. The hedgerows of Normandy weren't like anything we'd trained for. Every field was a fortress. Every tree line hid an 88. We'd been grinding forward for weeks since D-Day, and by late June, Field Marshal Montgomery was under enormous pressure. Caen should have fallen on the first day. It was still holding, and the Americans were screaming for us to tie down German armor so they could break out at St. Lo. Operation Epsom was supposed to be our hammer blow. Massive, overwhelming, 3 divisions pushing south, crossing the Odon River, taking Hill 112, and rolling up the German flank. That was the plan, anyway. My section was part of the advance elements. We weren't supposed to be heroes. We were scouts, pathfinders for the main assault. Our job was to find crossings, identify German positions, and stay alive long enough to report back. Simple, right? Our section leader was Sergeant Duncan MacLeod, 32 years old, a veteran of North Africa and Sicily, with a face like weathered granite and a dry sense of humor that kept us sane. He'd been recommended for a commission twice and turned it down both times. "Officers don't see the ground," he told me once. "They see maps. I want to see what's actually there." There were 6 of us in the section. MacLeod, me. Then there was Tommy Brennan, a quick-talking Glaswegian who could strip and reassemble a Bren gun blindfolded. Peter Ashworth, our radio operator, who'd been a schoolteacher in Dundee and wrote letters home to his wife every single night. Willie Fraser, barely 18, who'd lied about his age to enlist and still had spots on his chin. And Davy Ross, our best shot, who never missed and never spoke unless he had something worth saying. On June 26th, we received our orders. The main push for Operation Epsom would begin the next morning at dawn, a massive artillery barrage followed by armor and infantry. But MacLeod's section was to move out that night. We were to cross the Odon under cover of darkness, scout the approaches to Hill 112, and identify German strongpoints before the main assault. "Why us?" Tommy asked as we prepped our kit. MacLeod didn't look up from his map. "Because if there's something ugly waiting on the other side of that river, someone needs to find it before 2,000 men walk into it." We moved out at 2200 hours, the summer twilight finally fading into darkness. The rain that had been threatening all day finally started, a steady, cold drizzle that soaked through our uniforms within minutes. Good, in a way. Rain meant the Germans would be huddled in their positions, visibility down, sentries miserable and inattentive. The front line was chaos even in quiet moments, constant small arms fire, the occasional burst of a machine gun, artillery rumbling in the distance like thunder that never stopped. We slipped through a gap between two rifle companies, crossed into no man's land, and entered another world. The hedgerows here were thick, ancient, their roots so deep they'd turned the Norman soil into a maze of earthen walls. Every field was isolated, every gap a potential kill zone. MacLeod led us south in single file, 20 meters between each man. No talking, hand signals only. We'd practiced this 100 times, but training and reality are different countries. In training, you don't smell the decomposing cattle in the fields. You don't hear German voices drifting through the darkness, close enough to make your heart stop. You don't feel the weight of knowing that one mistake, one snapped twig, one cough, one moment of inattention could kill all of you. We moved for 2 hours before we reached the Odon. It wasn't impressive, maybe 30 feet wide, the water dark and fast-moving from the rain. But the approaches were exposed, and MacLeod spent 20 minutes glassing the far bank with his binoculars before he was satisfied. "There," he whispered, pointing to a spot where the bank had collapsed, creating a natural ramp down to the water. "We'll cross there. Willie, you're first. Get to the far bank and cover us." Willie nodded, his face pale in the darkness. He slung his rifle across his back, stepped into the water, and immediately sank to his chest. The current pulled at him, but he fought his way across, clambered up the far bank, and took up position in the brush. One by one, we followed. The water was shockingly cold. My boots filled immediately, and the current was stronger than it looked. Peter, weighted down with the radio, nearly went under before Tommy grabbed him. But we made it, all 6 of us on the far bank, soaked and shivering, deep in German-held territory. MacLeod checked his compass, oriented himself, and led us southeast toward the slopes that would eventually rise to Hill 112. Intelligence said the hill was lightly held, a few observation posts, maybe a company of infantry. The real German strength was supposed to be further south, centered around Ivressi. Intelligence was wrong. We covered maybe half a kilometer before Davy Ross, on point, raised his fist. We all froze. He pointed ahead, then tapped his ear. "Listen." I heard it then, the low rumble of engines, not 1 or 2, dozens, and beneath that, the distinctive clank and squeal of tank tracks. MacLeod crawled forward to join Davy. I watched his silhouette go rigid. He waved me up. When I reached him, I understood why. The field ahead sloped gently upward, and positioned along that slope, camouflaged under netting and branches, were tanks, not the Panzer IVs we'd been seeing. These were different, massive, angular, with long guns that looked like they could punch through anything we had. Even in the darkness, they were terrifying. "Tiger eyes," MacLeod breathed. "King Tigers, bloody hell." I'd heard about them, the newest German heavy tanks, nearly impervious to British armor, mounting an 88mm gun that could kill a Sherman at 2,000 yards. And there were at least 20 of them in front of us, arranged in a defensive arc facing north, facing exactly where our attack would come from in 6 hours. "We need to report this," Peter whispered, reaching for the radio. MacLeod grabbed his wrist. "Not yet. We need to know how many, what formation, whether they're dug in or mobile. Get me a full picture, then we'll call it in." "Sarge, if we wait. If we report now and give them incomplete intelligence, Monty will adjust the attack, but not enough. We need to know exactly what we are facing. Give me 30 minutes. It was a gamble, a terrible one, but MacLeod was right. Incomplete intelligence was worse than none at all. It would get our men killed just as surely as no warning, except they'd die confident they knew what they were facing. We split into 2 teams. MacLeod, Davy, and I would circle west and count the tanks on that flank. Tommy, Peter, and Willie would move east and do the same. We'd meet back at this position in 25 minutes. My team moved like ghosts, staying low, using every bit of cover. The rain helped, masking our movement, but it also made the ground treacherous. We counted 14 tanks on the western flank, all positioned hull down behind earthen berms. Dug in, this wasn't a mobile reserve, this was a prepared defensive position. As we turned to head back, I heard voices. German, close. We froze behind a hedgerow as a patrol passed less than 10 meters away, 4 men, talking quietly, smoking cigarettes that glowed red in the darkness. They didn't see us, didn't suspect. They walked on, and we waited until the sound of their boots faded before moving again. We made it back to the rendezvous point. Tommy's team was already there, and the news was worse. 18 tanks on the eastern flank, plus what looked like at least 2 companies of panzer grenadiers dug into trenches. This wasn't a light holding force. This was an entire armored battle group, positioned perfectly to slaughter our attack. Peter, get on the radio, MacLeod ordered. Brigade needs to know about this now. Peter extended the antenna, adjusted the frequency, and pressed the transmit button. Nothing. He tried again. Static, then nothing. He checked the connections, tried a different frequency. Dead. The river, he said, his voice tight, must have gotten water in the casing. It's dead. The silence that followed was absolute. We were 5 kilometers behind enemy lines with intelligence that could save thousands of lives, and we had no way to communicate it. MacLeod's jaw worked for a moment, then he made his decision. We go back, now, fast as we can. We get across that river, we get to our lines, and we report in person. Move. We turned north, abandoning stealth for speed. The rain was heavier now, turning the ground to mud. We ran when we could, jogged when we couldn't, always listening for pursuit. We were a kilometer from the Odon when the flare went up. Someone had found our trail. Someone had raised the alarm. The flare hung in the sky like a miniature sun, casting everything in harsh white light, and I saw German soldiers behind us, spreading out, beginning to move. Run, MacLeod shouted, and we ran. The hedgerows that had protected us on the way in were now obstacles. We crashed through gaps, scrambled over earthen walls, lungs burning, legs screaming. Behind us, shouts in German. A burst of machine gun fire, but wild, unaimed. They knew roughly where we were, but they didn't have us yet. We reached the Odon. The rain had swollen it, the current faster now, the water higher. MacLeod didn't hesitate, he plunged in and we followed. The cold hit me like a fist. The current grabbed me, pulled me downstream. I fought it, kicked hard, felt my boots touch the bottom, pushed off, and made it to the far bank. Tommy was there, Peter was there, dragging himself out. MacLeod was pulling Willie up. I turned to look for Davy. He was in the middle of the river, struggling. The current had him. He was trying to swim, but the weight of his equipment was pulling him under. I saw his face, saw the panic in his eyes. Tommy and I both moved at once, wadding back in, reaching for him. I got a hand on his webbing, pulled hard. Tommy grabbed his rifle strap. We dragged him toward the bank, fighting the current every inch. That's when the Germans reached the far bank. I saw muzzle flashes, heard the crack of rifles. Bullets snapped through the air around us, hitting the water with sharp plops. Davy jerked in our grip. Once, twice. We got him to the bank. He was hit. I could see blood spreading across his chest. His eyes were open, looking at me, but the light in them was fading. Go, he whispered, go. We're not leaving you, I said, trying to lift him. James, his hand gripped my arm with surprising strength. You have to report, thousands of them, you have to go. MacLeod grabbed my shoulder. He's right, we have to move, now. I looked at Davy, at his face, at the blood. at the German troops gathering on the far bank, preparing to cross. "I'm sorry," I said. "Tell them," Davy said, "tell them what we found." We ran. Behind us, I heard a single gunshot. I don't know if the Germans did it or if Davy did it himself. I never asked. I never wanted to know. We covered the kilometer back to our lines in what felt like both seconds and hours. Our own sentries nearly shot us, 6 filthy, soaked men stumbling out of no man's land. MacLeod was shouting passwords, identifying himself, demanding to speak to the battalion commander immediately. They brought us to a command post, a farmhouse with sandbagged windows and maps covering every wall. A major listened to MacLeod's report, his face growing more grave with every sentence. When MacLeod finished, the major picked up a field telephone. "Get me division," he said. "Now, priority 1. I don't know what happened in the hours that followed. We were shuffled to the rear, given hot tea and dry socks, told to wait. The artillery barrage that was supposed to start at dawn was delayed, then delayed again. Then, finally, at 1000 hours, it began, but not where it was originally planned. The shells fell on the positions we'd identified, systematically destroying the German armor before our infantry ever moved. When Operation Epsom finally kicked off that afternoon, our forces took heavy casualties. It was still brutal, still bloody, but they weren't massacred. They weren't channeled into a prepared kill zone where King Tigers could destroy them at will. They had a chance. 3 days later, MacLeod was summoned to brigade headquarters. When he came back, his face was stone. "They're giving Davy a mention in dispatches," he said, "posthumous, for gallantry in the face of the enemy." "That's good," Tommy said. "He deserves it." "They're not mentioning the mission. They're not mentioning what we found. They're saying he died on a routine patrol. They're calling it a minor reconnaissance action." "Why?" I asked. MacLeod looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Bitterness, disgust. Because if they admit they had incomplete intelligence, if they admit they almost sent 3 divisions into a meat grinder, someone's career gets damaged. Can't have that. Better to keep it quiet. Better to let Davy be just another name on just another casualty list. We never spoke about it again, not officially. After Epsom, we pushed on toward Hill 112, fought through the rest of Normandy, crossed the Rhine, ended up in a displaced persons camp in northern Germany when the war ended. MacLeod made it through, so did Tommy and Peter and Willie. We all made it through, carrying Davy with us in our heads. The old man, James Colquhoun, stopped speaking. The museum had gone completely silent around us. Even the school group was listening now, their teacher's hand over her mouth. "They never corrected the records?" I asked quietly. "No, Operation Epsom is remembered as a heroic but costly assault. Montgomery's boldness, British determination, all true as far as it goes, but they don't mention the night of June 26th. They don't mention that someone saw the trap before it closed. They moved the date to the 28th because that's when the official war diary says we crossed the Odon in force." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Wikipedia wasn't there. "What happened to Sergeant MacLeod?" "Killed in Germany, March 1945. Sniper, 3 weeks before the war ended." He paused. "Tommy Brennan died of lung cancer in 1987. Peter Ashworth in a car accident in 1999. Willie Fraser is in a home in Edinburgh, dementia, doesn't remember any of it anymore. I'm the last one who can still tell it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. 6 young men in British uniforms, grinning at the camera, arms around each other's shoulders. One of them had a white circle drawn around his face in faded ink. "That's Davy Ross, 21 years old, never missed a shot, never got the recognition he deserved because the truth was inconvenient." He handed me the photograph. I looked at the face, so young, so alive, frozen forever in that moment before history ate him. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. James Colquhoun looked at me with those pale blue eyes, and I saw the 19-year-old Lance Corporal still living behind them. "Remember his name," he said, "David Alexander Ross, Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. He died so that thousands of others could live, and the army buried him in bureaucracy because admitting the truth was embarrassing. Don't let him be just another name on a wall. Remember who he was, remember what he did. I will, I said. He nodded slowly, then stood, gripping his walking stick. The crowd that had gathered parted for him as he walked toward the exit. No one mocked his wet jacket now. No one called him Grandad. I watched him go, this ordinary old man carrying extraordinary weight, and I understood something I hadn't before. History doesn't just forget the names, it forgets the truth. It smooths over the messy parts, the inconvenient parts, the parts that don't fit the narrative. But James Colquhoun remembered, and now so do I. And now so do you. Remember David Alexander Ross.